It's a frustrating situation. You're sharing advice or giving instructions and the other person just isn't listening. Why does this happen? And how can you prevent it? Today I'm talking to Eleanor Shakiba about 3 behaviours which cause people to stop listening. So Eleanor, how can you pick up if someone stopped listening to you?
So it's usually the non-verbal cues, things like their eyes glazing over, or perhaps they're going, but it's in the wrong place or at the wrong time. Or maybe there's a disconnect in they're saying one thing and you're saying something and there's no lining up of those 2 messages. So you actually have to pay quite close attention to be able to pick up on some of those cues.
So if we dig in and look at the different levels of listening, is it possible for someone, for instance, to be sort of listening to you, but actually they're loading up ready to fire back at you to refute what you're saying, compared with someone who's really genuinely listening?
So that's what I call being in debate mode as opposed to being in dialogue mode. So debate is where I'm only listening to get my argument ready to come back and shoot you down later. But if I'm in dialogue mode, I'm going, oh, Humphrey, tell me a bit more about that, because I see things very differently. So tell me where you're coming from with that. And I'm actively exploring what's going on from the other person's perspective.
I think if we're talking and someone turns off, why does that often happen?
Well, quite often you haven't told them the benefit for them of listening to you. So they're going to have a short attention span because they don't understand what's in it for them. So quite often people will cut off from you because they don't think there is anything worthwhile in what you're saying, sorry to say. Secondly, you might have triggered what we call the inner child reaction, and that's where they feel like they're being put down, that you're coming at them like a parent, and so they're going into a defensive response, or they're going into a hyper-submissive response where they're taking a childlike quality.
And what triggers, in fact, that sort of rather rebellious child response? Is it the words we use, or is it the way we use them, or do we reflect a parent character or someone in their lives that sort of triggers that response?
So it's both the verbal and the non-verbal. So there'll be aspects of the verbal such as you should, you must, you have to, or when I was your age, if you want to sound like a parent, try using that particular phrase. But non-verbally, if you're standing there doing this sort of body language or this sort of body language, it's going to come across as being quite overbearing, and you'll be associated with someone who's trying to control, and people often identify a parent with that.
With that sense of being controlled?
Yeah.
Or being talked down to?
Yeah, or told what to do.
Okay. So, thinking of ourselves and our own communication, how can we actually prevent people from turning off? What are some of the practical steps we can take as the sender to prevent people from turning off?
So I always suggest that people start with a benefits phrase. This is going to be important to you because, or that problem you have with this? Well, I've found some information that might be really useful for you. And that way what you're doing is tagging up front the reason why the person should listen to you. Secondly, see it as a conversation, and that term dialogue. Ask questions, ask for feedback, get the person themselves really participating, and really monitor your body language, making sure that you've got that open posture, that you're not going into any of our pointing positions, that you're opening up your shoulders, you're keeping your body position quite open and level, and you're not sending that message that you're in parental mode.
Right. So what would be some really practical steps that you can use or that you suggest managers or people who are giving presentations, what practical steps can they use to actually prevent people from turning off and stopping listening?
One of the first things I say is be brave and ask someone to give you some feedback. And ask them if you're doing anything that is turning people off. I remember when I was a novice trainer, when I got nervous, I'd stand like this and I'd get all these hostile reactions. I felt safe and comfortable with my hands on my hips, but what happened was aggressive people would see it as an attack. And I was lucky I had a really good manager who gave me the feedback that I was doing that, so I was able to stop. So find someone who's seen you in action and who you trust and ask them for that level of feedback. And secondly, have a look in Difficult People Made Easy at the chapter on how to get into all right mode, because that will give you lots of tips on how to do that non-verbal side of the conversation and keep things on track.
So, Eleanor, that's again, I think that's given us some really practical, helpful hints, because I think it's not only, it really affects and relates to all of us, doesn't it, in terms of how to gain and maintain people's attention and keep them listening. So just thinking ahead and thinking of next month we're going to be talking about challenging blame game tactics, which I think is fascinating, and exploring why, in fact, people do that is going to be a fun topic to work with next time.
Look forward to seeing you next month.
Right.